Pedro I of Brazil, 1798–1834, was a central figure in the establishment of Brazilian independence and the first emperor of Brazil, reigning from 1822 to 1831. His life, characterized by passionate politics and personal struggles, played a pivotal role in shaping modern Brazil. Although he reigned only briefly, his impact on both Brazilian and Portuguese history was profound. Known for his charismatic personality, complex relationships, and significant achievements, Pedro's life was a dramatic blend of military ambition, political struggles, and personal conflicts. Early life and background. Pedro was born on October 12, 1798, in the royal palace of Clus, near Lisbon, Portugal. He was the fourth child of King João VI of Portugal and Queen Carlota Joaquina. The Portuguese royal family was of the Braganza dynasty, one of the oldest and most prominent European dynasties. As a young boy, Dom Pedro was educated in a variety of subjects, including military and administrative skills, which would later influence his leadership style. His education was strict, as his father sought to prepare him for future leadership. He showed early signs of being a passionate and somewhat rebellious character, traits that would define his life and reign. In 1807, when Pedro was just 9 years old, the royal family fled Portugal as Napoleon Bonaparte's army invaded. This dramatic move brought the entire Portuguese court to Brazil, which had been a colony of Portugal since the 16th century. Pedro's arrival in Rio de Janeiro marked the beginning of his lifelong connection with Brazil. The Portuguese court settled in Rio de Janeiro, transforming the colony into the administrative center of the Portuguese Empire. This relocation significantly impacted Brazil, bringing with it European ideas, infrastructure, and institutions. Rise to power and Brazil's independence. When Pedro reached adulthood, he was popular among Brazilians and held considerable influence in Brazilian affairs. In 1820, a liberal revolution erupted in Portugal, calling for constitutional reforms and a reduction of the monarchy's power. João VI returned to Portugal in 1821, leaving Pedro as the regent in Brazil, effectively governing in his father's place. However, tensions between Portugal and Brazil were growing. The Portuguese parliament demanded that Brazil be returned to its former status as a colony and that Pedro return to Portugal. Brazilian leaders feared losing the semi-autonomy they had experienced while the Portuguese court was in Brazil. In 1822, Dom Pedro famously refused the Portuguese parliament's order to return, instead declaring his intention to remain in Brazil and support its desire for autonomy. On September 7, 1822, he issued a Declaration of Independence, an event known as the Cry of Ipiranga. Reportedly, Pedro shouted, "Independencia ou morte!" Independence or death. On the banks of the Ipiranga River, a defining moment in Brazilian history. Emperor of Brazil. After declaring independence, Pedro was crowned Emperor of Brazil on October 12, 1822, at the age of 24. His reign faced numerous challenges, both internal and external. Brazil was now an independent empire, but it faced the difficulty of uniting a vast and culturally diverse landmass. Pedro's efforts to consolidate the empire required balancing the interests of various regions and factions, as well as establishing Brazil's international position. In 1824, he established Brazil's first constitution, which granted significant power to the emperor but also set up a legislature. This constitution, progressive for its time, allowed for freedom of speech and the press. Pedro's approach to ruling was influenced by Enlightenment ideas, though he often leaned toward authoritarianism. Nevertheless, the constitution became a cornerstone of Brazilian governance, lasting until 1889 when Brazil became a republic. Pedro's rule was complicated by his tumultuous relationship with Portugal. In 1826, his father, King João VI, passed away, leaving the Portuguese throne vacant. Pedro briefly inherited the throne, becoming Pedro IV of Portugal, but he soon abdicated in favor of his young daughter, Maria II. This decision caused conflicts within the Portuguese monarchy, as his younger brother, Miguel, seized power in Portugal, sparking a civil war. Dom Pedro's split loyalties between Brazil and Portugal created a strain on his reign as Emperor of Brazil, and he was increasingly viewed with suspicion by his Brazilian subjects. Personal life and marriages. Pedro's personal life was filled with drama and scandal, affecting his popularity and political stability. His first marriage was to Archduchess Maria Leopoldina of Austria, a beloved figure in Brazilian history. Maria Leopoldina was well-educated, supportive, and deeply committed to Brazil. She played a key role in supporting Pedro's decision to declare independence, and she served as regent during his absences. They had several children together, including his successor, Pedro II. However, Pedro's numerous extramarital affairs, especially with his longtime mistress, Domitila de Castro, the Marchioness of Santos, created scandal. This relationship became a significant source of discontent, straining his marriage with Maria Leopoldina and damaging his reputation among the Brazilian populace. After Maria Leopoldina's death in 1826, Dom Pedro married Amalie of Leuchtenberg, a German noblewoman. This marriage was much more harmonious and less scandal-ridden, though it did little to repair his tarnished reputation in Brazil. Abdication and later years. By 1831, Pedro's position in Brazil had become increasingly difficult. Political opposition grew, fueled by the economic issues and the controversial nature of his rule. Many in the Brazilian elite were discontented with his perceived authoritarianism and his focus on Portuguese affairs, particularly the civil war over his daughter's throne. Additionally, his favoritism towards Portuguese-born advisors and officials alienated the Brazilian-born elite. Facing mounting pressure, Pedro abdicated the throne on April 7, 1831, in favor of his son, Pedro II, who was only 5 years old at the time. This abdication marked the end of the First Brazilian Empire and initiated a regency period that would last until Dom Pedro II came of age. After abdicating, Dom Pedro returned to Europe, where he focused on reclaiming the Portuguese throne for his daughter Maria. This effort became known as the Liberal Wars or Miguelite Wars, a conflict between constitutionalist liberals and absolutists who supported Dom Miguel. Pedro led the liberals, fighting against his brother's forces, ultimately emerging victorious in 1834. This victory restored his daughter Maria II to the throne of Portugal. Death and legacy. Pedro I passed away from tuberculosis on September 24, 1834, in Clus Palace, the same place where he had been born. He was only 35 years old. Despite his short life, his legacy endures both in Brazil and Portugal. In Brazil, Pedro is celebrated as a hero of independence and the founder of the empire. His decision to support Brazilian independence and his leadership during the formative years of the country solidified his place as one of Brazil's most significant historical figures. His son, Dom Pedro II, would go on to rule Brazil for nearly 50 years, further cementing the Braganza dynasty's impact on Brazilian history.
Thank you for watching. Please subscribe our channel.